Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Arbitrary 20. In this video, we'll be going over the changes to the Druid in the 2024 revision of D&D. We'll be mainly talking about what these changes mean for different character builds and some potential new builds that these changes might open up. And this video is going to be a little bit different than the ones I've previously done on the first 4 classes. I've mainly been using these articles that D&D Beyond has been putting out just because it organizes the information nicely, but now there's more information out there with the Player's Handbook being sold at Gen Con and a lot of other content creators getting early access to the book. We pretty much have all of the information now. I'll still be using these articles when I can, but we now know information that might not be in these articles, so I'll talk about that stuff as well. But specifically for this video, they only made this article for Wild Shape and the Moon Druid. So for the other 3 Druid subclasses and for the rest of the main Druid features, it'll just be me talking to you like this, and I'll put the features up on the screen. But spoiler alert, I guess Wild Shape still isn't until level 2, so we'll go ahead and start off with level 1. Spellcasting is pretty much the same, but just like all the other spellcasters, they now have a table that lets you know how many spells you can prepare, instead of it being based on your wisdom plus your character level. For most builds, I don't think this change is really going to matter. It should be a similar amount of spells either way. But there is a new feature at level 1, Primal Order. You have 2 options to choose from. You get the Magician or the Warden. With the Magician, you get an extra cantrip from the Druid spell list, and you also get a bonus to your Intelligence, Arcana, or Nature checks, and the bonus is your Wisdom modifier. And then for Warden, you get Trained for Battle. You gain proficiency with martial weapons and medium armor, and by default now, Druids just have light armor and shields, which is another pretty big change. I guess this could be considered a nerf, but frankly I'm happy with anything that removes the cannot wear metal armor restriction. I think this is fine. If you still want to be just like the old Druid, you can just select the Warden option, and I actually think that's the better of the 2 options. Getting an extra cantrip I don't think is a huge deal. You already get 2 to begin with, and going up to 4, that's likely going to be enough. I think the extra armor class is always going to be better. Unless you're doing a build that's specifically focused on skills, I could see taking the Magician instead, but I think most characters are going to want to take the Warden feature. And then on to level 2, where we'll get Wild Shape, and this table goes over all the differences between the 2014 Wild Shape and the 2024 Wild Shape. It's now a bonus action for everybody, not just the Moon Druid. For the number of uses, it still starts off at 2 uses, but eventually it's 3 uses at level 6 and 4 uses at level 17. And then for replenishing the uses, it just used to be on short or long rest. You now regain 1 on a short rest and all when you finish a long rest. And when you get to level 5, you can use Wild Resurgence to expend a spell slot to get a use of your Wild Shape back, and you can also expend Wild Shape to get a spell slot back. I believe the Wild Shape to get a spell slot back is once per long rest though. And then at level 20, if you roll initiative and have no uses of Wild Shape, you get to regain 1 use. So you no longer have unlimited uses of Wild Shape at level 20, but you are at least able to have 1 per combat. Level 20 gameplay isn't super common anyway, and with any multi-class build, you're not going to be getting the capstone. So I don't think that change to the level 20 feature is going to be a huge deal, but I think for any level other than 20, this is going to be a lot more uses of Wild Shape, which is really cool. And then for hit points in Wild Shape, this is one of the biggest changes. You no longer get the hit points and hit dice of the beast, you just get temporary hit points equal to your Druid level. This is going to be a significant nerf to defenses for any Wild Shape character, but I think the builds that focused on tanking with this feature, like the Barbarian Moon Druid, will still work, but they'll be a little bit weaker. And then for the beast form limitations, the level requirements are fairly similar, but you now have up to 8 known forms, and you can only transform into those forms. And when you finish a long rest, you can replace one of the known forms with another eligible one, and you can also now speak in your beast form. I think the speaking in your beast form is a really cool change. If somebody in your party didn't have telepathy or something like that, then you just couldn't talk to your party in character. But in terms of the known forms thing, I don't think that's going to be too big of a hindrance for any build. I think 4 known forms is already enough to have most of your bases covered in terms of versatility, and especially once you get to level 8 with 8 known forms, I don't think you're really going to notice that change. And then for damage in Wild Shape, you now get Primal Strike at level 7, letting you add an additional d8 of elemental damage to a hit with a weapon or a beast form attack. The damage is chosen on a hit, and the damage increases to 2d8 at level 15, so that's nice specifically for Moon Druids. I don't see any of the other Druid classes fighting in Wild Shape very much, but for Moon Druids, that will help their damage scale at higher levels. And then they ported over a Wild Companion from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything as well, so you can now cast Find Familiar with the use of your Wild Shape. And they do bring up a good point here that could make a difference for some builds. With Wild Shape now giving you temporary hit points, even if you lose those temporary hit points, you're able to maintain the form for the full duration, and potentially even gain new temporary hit points from another source. So it might be more worth it to build around a beast form's attacks or features now that you can guarantee that you'll be able to stay in it for the full duration. And then the next thing will be the subclasses at level 3, so we can go over the Moon Druid really quick. Subclasses now start at level 3, just like like for every other class. For the circle forms, it's still going to be your Druid level divided by 3 for the challenge rating, and the Moon Druid will have better defenses in beast form as well. The AC in beast form is 13 plus your wisdom modifier, unless your beast form's AC is higher, but you also gain 3 times your Druid level in temporary hit points, meaning you'll get 9 temporary hit points at level 3 all the way up to 60 temporary hit points at level 20. I still don't think that's going to be as good defensively as the previous wild shape, but it will definitely make a difference. And then the Circle of the Moon also gets their own spell list, and they're able to cast those spells in beast form, which is pretty cool. I think the most significant spells on that list are going to be Cure Wounds. You can heal in your beast form in a pinch. It's still not great because it's going to use up your action, but if one of your allies is about to die and you really need it, you have it. And then the other spell that I think is going to be pretty big is Fount of Moonlight. This gives you additional damage on each of your melee attacks, so if you're able to get this up before you go into a combat, that could be really good. And then at level 6 you gain the ability to change your attack's damage types to radiant damage, and you get to add your wisdom modifier to your constitution saving throws. We'll have to wait for the monster manual to see how good changing damage types is, but adding your wisdom modifier to constitution saving throws is really good. Any spells on the Moon Druid spell list that are concentration are going to really benefit from this. And then at level 10 we get Moonlight Step, pretty much just a misty step you can use before your wild shape, and it also gives you advantage on your next attack roll. And then at level 14 you get Lunar Form, which lets you deal an additional 2d10 radiant damage to a target you hit in wild shape. So you're getting 2d10 from this and 2d8 from Primal Strikes by level 15. And this feature also lets you take a nearby creature with you when you use your Moonlight Step to teleport. So overall, I think these are pretty good changes to the Moon Druid. We'll have to see how those higher CR beast forms end up in the monster manual as well, and hopefully there's a couple more options at CR 5 and 6. It is sad to see Elemental Wild Shape go, but Moonlight Step is a pretty cool feature, and it is really nice to see 1000 forms go, because that was pretty much just a useless 14th level feature. And now we can talk about the other 3 subclasses. First we have the Circle of the Land. The Circle of the Land still gets the different spell list depending on the environment that they choose, but now they can change their environment at the end of any long rest. So this is going to give the Land Druid a lot more versatility in the spells they can have prepared. They do only have 4 different lists now, but all of them have at least 1 good spell on them. Most of them have multiple good spells on them. In Arid Land, I would say the highlights are Fireball and Wall of Stone. For Polar Land, I think pretty much everything you get from level 3 and 5 is good. Fog Cloud, Hold Person, Ray of Frost, and Sleet Storm. Cone of Cold at level 9 also isn't terrible. For Temperate Land, you get Misty Step, Sleep, and Lightning Bolt. Sleep did get nerfed quite a bit, but it's still not a bad first level spell. And then for Tropical Land, we get Web and Polymorph. Polymorph pretty much just got changed to temporary hit points, but is pretty much the same. So it's still going to do its job of just giving one of your allies 150 hit points and turning them into a giant ape. And then at level 3, they get Land's Aid. As a magic action, you can expend a use of your wild shape and choose a point within 60 feet of you. Vitality giving flowers and life draining thorns appear for a moment in a 10-foot radius sphere centered on that point. Each creature of your choice within the sphere must make a constitution saving throw against your spell save DC. They'll take 2d6 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one, and one creature of your choice in that area regains 2d6 hit points. The damage and the healing scale at 10th and 14th level. If you have extra uses of your wild shape, I think this is a pretty decent feature. I think it's cool that you're able to damage and heal at the same time. This is pretty similar to the Wither and Bloom spell from Strixhaven, but instead of being a 2nd level spell slot, you just get to expend a use of your wild shape. And then at level 6 you get Natural Recovery, which I think is pretty similar, still just letting you recover some spell slots on a short rest, and you're also able to cast one of your circle spells for free without expending a spell slot. And then at level 10 we get Nature's Ward, which now gives us immunity to the poison condition, and we have resistance to a damage type associated with our current land choice, which again we can change at the end of every long rest, so this gets a lot better. Arid gives you fire, Polar gives you cold, Temperate gives you lightning, and Tropical gives you poison. And then at level 14 we get Nature's Sanctuary. As a magic action, you can expend a use of your wild shape to cause spectral trees and vines to appear in a 15-foot cube on the ground within 120 feet of yourself. They last for 1 minute or until you have the incapacitated condition or die, and your allies have half cover within the area and gain the resistance of your Nature's Ward. And as a bonus action, you can move the cube up to 60 feet. So this is a pretty good feature, at least situationally. If you know you're going to be going up against a certain damage type and you can do this and give your entire party resistance to that damage type, it'll be really strong. Other than that, if you're only giving half cover, I think there's probably better things you can do at level 14. But now we'll go on to Circle of the Sea. They also get spells at 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th level. Some good spells that they get are Fog Cloud, Ray of Frost, Shatter, Lightning Bolt, and Control Water. And their other third level feature is Wrath of the Sea. As a bonus action, you can expend a use of your wild shape to manifest a 5-foot emanation that takes form in the form of ocean spray that surrounds you for 10 minutes. It ends earlier if you dismiss it, no action required, manifest it again, or have the incapacitated condition. When you manifest the emanation and as a bonus action on your subsequent turns, you can choose another creature you can see in the emanation and must make a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC, or take cold damage, and if the creature is larger or smaller, be pushed 15 feet away from you. To determine this damage, roll a number of d6s equal to your wisdom modifier. So this is an interesting feature. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's only a 5-foot emanation. If you're a druid casting your big control and summon spells from range, you're probably not going to be in melee that often. It is nice that it pushes the enemies away from you, so if an enemy does rush up to you, it can push them away. I think this feature gets a lot better later on when you're able to give it to one of your allies. But at level 6, we get Aquatic Affinity. The emanation increases to 10 feet for your Wrath of the Sea, and you get a swim speed in addition to your speed. And then at level 10, we get Stormborn. Wrath of the Sea gets 2 more benefits. Flight, you get a fly speed equal to your speed, and you get resistance to cold, lightning, and thunder damage. So that immediately makes this a lot better and useful in a lot more situations. And then at level 14, we get Oceanic Gift. Instead of manifesting the emanation around yourself, you can manifest it around one willing creature within 60 feet of yourself. That creature gains all of the benefits of the emanation and uses your spell DC and wisdom modifier for it. In addition, you can manifest the emanation around both the other creature and yourself if you expend 2 uses of wild shape instead of 1 when manifesting it. I think this feature is really cool and I wish we got it a little bit earlier. I think the best part is going to be giving the emanation to one of your melee allies who will likely get a lot better use out of it. And then lastly, there's Circle of the Stars, which is pretty much the same as it was in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But back to the base class, which some of the features we talked about in Moon Druid, like Wild Resurgence, letting you give yourself an additional use of wild shape with a spell slot, or giving yourself an additional spell slot with a use of wild shape. You get that at level 5, and again, you can give yourself uses of wild shape with spell slots as many times as you want, but you can only give yourself a spell slot consuming a use of wild shape 1 time per long rest. And then at level 7 and level 15, we get Elemental Fury and Improved Elemental Fury respectively. We talked about half of this feature during the Moon Druid, Primal Strike. This gives you the extra d8 and then 2d8 elemental damage to one of your attacks. But the other option is Potent Spellcasting, which at level 7 lets you add your wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with a druid cantrip, so similar to the Cleric feature. And then at level 15, the upgrade is that when you cast a druid cantrip with a range of 10 feet or greater, the spell's range increases to 300 feet. Adding your wisdom modifier to the damage is really good. I don't see the 300-foot range coming up very often, but it is still a cool feature nonetheless. And then I think the 18th level feature, Beast Spells, is fairly similar. And then at level 20, we have Archdruid, which we also talked a little bit about this in the Moon Druid. You now get 1 use of wild shape whenever you roll initiative and you don't have any, and that's what you get instead of having unlimited uses of wild shape. But you also now get the Nature Magician feature. You can convert uses of wild shape into a spell slot, no action required. Choose a number of your unexpended uses of wild shape and convert them into a single spell slot, with each use contributing to 2 spell levels. For example, if you convert 2 uses of wild shape, you can produce a level 4 spell slot. Once you use this benefit, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So with this feature and Wild Resurgence, by expending uses of wild shape over the course of a day, you can regain 2 spell slots, which I think the interesting thing about this one is that you could spend 4 uses of wild shape to get an 8th level spell slot back. That's one of the only ways I know of in the game to get an 8th level spell slot back, which is pretty cool. And that might actually be something you do if you're not really using your wild shape for anything else, like if you only are using it to cast Find Familiar and you're not using it for traveling or anything like that. It might be a completely viable thing to do if you're doing a combat heavy session to just make another 8th level spell slot. I can definitely see the Land Druid, who has the most situational uses for their wild shape, to use this to get a 6th or 8th level spell slot back. The Moon Druid definitely won't be using this a whole lot. And the Sea and the Stars Druid might use this occasionally, but the Wrath of the Sea and the Starry Form at level 14 are going to be pretty good every combat. And then the feature that causes you to age more slowly was also moved here, which it's just flavor, but depending on the style of campaign you do, if you do multiple long form campaigns all strung together and your druid is alive for all of them, that's pretty cool. But yeah, the primal magic that you wield causes you to age more slowly. For every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 year. So that's still here, it just got moved to the level 20 feature instead of, I think it was at 18 or 19 before, but not a huge deal either way. But I think that's all the changes to the druid. Still a great class overall. For the Moon Druid specifically, we'll have to wait for the monster manual to see how those higher CR beasts turned out. They didn't print everything the Moon Druid can transform into in the player's handbook. Just those early levels, I think. So for, I guess, the first like 3 months of using the player's handbook, we'll just have to use the old monster manual, but it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I hope there's some new possibilities for Moon Druid builds with those new beasts. But yeah, that's it for the video. In the last video, I talked about the rogue. If you'd like to check that out, it'll be right here. And in the next video, it looks like we'll be talking about the wizard, so hope to see you there. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one.